Theater has taught me that it doesn't really take a lot to make community. I have seen community start to blossom at the first read-through of a play. In a way, you're kind of setting up a little community for a short amount of time where you're like family, and you're all kind of grappling with this particular history of these particular characters, and you're doing it together. I think that's why I keep coming back to it. It's the only child in me who was like, somebody come and play, you know, that Sesame Street song. Of gathering people to make something together. I think if this were the 1920s, I would have been Judy Garland and what's his name putting on a show in the backyard, or the Little Rascals or something. So that's something that's always been in me that now gets to manifest itself time and time again. Another thing that theater has taught me is that kind of the true meaning of the word respect, to look again. Because there's some characters who on their face look despicable. But through a process of analysis and coming to understand their journey about how they got to this point to do that thing that they did or say that thing that they said. But I think being respectful, looking again, is something that you can do. And that is something that I would then encourage people to find in theater work. How do you look again and again and again? My name is Latrelle Bright, and I am a theater maker. I am a military brat. My mother was in the Air Force, and so moving around a lot and not really having a stable place made me painfully shy. And so it was actually my mother who literally pushed me into dance lessons and singing lessons, not acting lessons when I was young. But I can't remember if it was a school trip or if my mom took me to see Annie on Broadway. And that did it. That was kind of the impetus for all of this. I wanted to be an orphan. It looked so cool in the musical. You got to sing and dance and all of that. When I got into high school, of course, there are all these options. And so I joined choir, I joined the drama club, and I had my very first lead role in a play called How Green Was My Brownie. Kind of a take on the How Green Was My Valley in a very comic way. And I remember opening night, I was so nervous, I was crying, and I can't remember who it was in the cast who said, let's just go outside and scream. So I went outside and I screamed as loud as I could, and then I went back in and I was fine. I had been fine during rehearsals, but that first performance where it was all on me was really, that's something I won't ever forget. I did a lot of musical theater in high school because I could sing. I didn't really care for plays that much because I wanted to sing and I wanted to dance. And when it was time to start thinking about college, I didn't really think about anything other than theater. I don't come from a family of folk who went to college. We didn't really know what to expect or what kinds of programs. Of course, my mother thought, well, Juilliard, Yale. I ended up going to the Boston Conservatory for a year, but only a year because it nearly killed us to send me there, which was only, what, $14,000 a year, circa 1989. I hate to think of what it is now. But it was really financially difficult. I had an assistantship and I had a little bit of a fellowship and some work study, and it was still really hard. So there was a school that I had auditioned for in California that I decided to transfer to instead. The university, what was it? The U.S. International University in San Diego. San Diego was gorgeous. But that school went bankrupt because one of the leaders had embezzled so much much money from the school. So then, I wanted to go to one of those big Ivy League schools, but financially it just wasn't going to be. So I transferred to Florida State as a musical theater major. But it's interesting, different schools have different ways of going about teaching you things, so I had to start all over, and I didn't want to do that. So I switched to communication, got out in 2.5 years, and didn't do theater for 6 years. I just didn't know what part of it or how to go about it because I didn't study it and complete that degree. I had no network of people, and so I moved to Atlanta. And I worked at a bookstore, Barnes & Noble. I loved working at Barnes & Noble. If I could make a living, the living that I want to make, if I could make the living I want to make working at Barnes & Noble, that would be the perfect job, really. I loved helping people find that orange and yellow book. Oh, The Road Less Traveled? Yes, The Road Less Traveled. It wasn't until I was in San Antonio, a whole journey of how I got from one place to another. But I was in San Antonio, and I was in paralegal school. And my family law teacher, Lee Mamarella, whose husband, Jim Mamarella, was a director in the theater scene there. He needed a stage manager. So for 2.5 years, I stage managed everything Jim Mamarella directed, and I fell in love with directing. And I think there was something in me, even when I was younger, that I performed because I could, but it wasn't really my thing. And I didn't stay in it long enough to kind of discover that I could have been a stage manager, I could have been a lighting designer, or I could have been a director. So I wanted to direct, but directing is one of the hardest things to break into because you can't audition. If you're an actor, you can show up and sing and dance and act and all those things. Director, people have to see what you do, but someone has to let you direct before they can see what you do. And I got really frustrated, especially since I had been working in that theater community for 2.5 years as a reliable, very effective stage manager. And so I started looking for other opportunities, and I met 2 lovely people, Danielle King and Paul Riddle Jr. They were working with a small theater company, and we did a show together. And I asked them, would y'all want to start a theater company? And they, for crazy reasons, I don't know, they said yes. And so there was no black theater in San Antonio at the time, not substantial anyway. And so we started a black theater company in San Antonio, Texas, which at that point was the 7th largest city in the nation, but only 6% African American. People thought we were crazy. But when we held our citywide auditions, people came out of the woodworks, and we started slow with like a 3-person cast for our first show. We opened our first show a week after 9/11, but people were looking for a reason to get out of the house, and so that we were a part of giving them a reason to get out of the house, which was really good. The administration of having a theater company took over, and even the last season that I was there, I didn't direct anything. And I was just like, I'm going to be the grant writer, or I'm going to be the one producing everything, but then I won't have the time and energy to direct. So I said, I need time and space just to be an artist for 3 years. And so I started looking for programs. And of course, I looked at Yale, I looked at Columbia, and I looked at, one of my board members had graduated from the University of Memphis, and she said, you need to call the University of Memphis and talk to Gloria Baxter. I graduated in the spring of 2008, in the middle of a great financial crisis. Theater companies were closing their doors, so I spent a year piecing it together. I directed a production of Taming of the Shrew at a small liberal arts college. I worked as audience development for a small theater company. I taught an Acting 1 class. I pieced it together, but then I remember seeing the job description for the program coordinator for Inner Voices Social Issues Theater at the University of Illinois, and thought, and I applied thinking, I know so many people who are much more qualified and have much more experience, like real world experience outside of the classroom in this field. But I got an interview, and I decided to drive from Jonesboro, Arkansas, where I was living at the moment. I wanted to see the Midwest. I wanted to see what I was getting myself into. And believe me, that drive in because I drove in through, what is that exit, 262 or 272 down by Willard. And so I was like, oh my God, what is this? And then I got on Neal and I saw the Walmart and I thought, that's great. But oh my goodness, but then I got closer to Kirby and it's just like, okay. Okay, and then when I got to Green and turned right, I see young people, I see life, I see, you know, cute little coffee shops and things like that. And I drove up to the Union and got my hotel room, and then the rest is kind of history for that. I've run into barriers with time and time again in my artistic life. Even in my graduate program, there were the hippie ladies, and then there was the traditional theater people, where sometimes there were these two ways. It's just like, it's all theater, it's all storytelling. Why can't we coexist in harmony? But I found that even on campus, I had kind of been pigeonholed into this one thing, and I still wanted to direct plays, and I still wanted to have time and space and the freedom to do that. And so when it became clear to me that I was not going to have the freedom to do that, I had a long talk with my husband about finances. Because when I talk about leaving a full-time job with benefits, I think a really important part of that conversation is the support system that I have. I have a husband with a job and benefits. I wasn't jumping off a cliff with 1,000 miles to the ground. I kind of jumped onto a pillow. So I like to be clear about that. Really what I'm doing here now is trying to figure out how to be an artist, a theater maker in the cornfields of Illinois, which I've come to love. And as a former military brat, or maybe I still am a military brat, I don't know if you ever released that, I have no desire to keep moving around. So even being a freelance director would require that I go live in some theater housing for a hot minute and direct a show in 3 weeks. Instead of, like with the water project, I was able to get some grant money, and we started in September. That didn't even go up until April. We were able to take our time, and that's really what I'm looking for now. Time and space to let stuff simmer and stew and kind of sink in and question it and turn it over and discard and make room for other stuff to come in. So creation of new work is very much a part of me, but I still love directing standard plays and musicals. So I'm in this odd space of trying to figure out how to make it work here and make sure that the landscape of my artistic life is broad enough to keep my interest.
To get involved and support the Urbana Public Arts program, please contact the Public Arts Coordinator Rachel Storm at rlstorm@urbanaillinois.us or 217-328-8265.